And we are getting a chance to hear from Congressman Kevin Yoder. He's actually joining us in studio, getting ready for November. What do you think about these close results, even in the GOP? I mean, it's painting a pretty clear picture of the divide with the governor's primary being so close, and who endorsed those candidates, President Donald Trump and Senator Bob Dole.
Yeah.
Those are two different sides of the Republican
Lots
Party.
of people weighing in, lots of divisions in politics. It's one of the things that kind of makes it exciting in some ways, because it takes a while to get the results, and hopefully it doesn't have to take this long, but very close races. We were fortunate last night to come out ahead very early, and we're able to, the race was called, and so thankful to have the opportunity to be the nominee for the 3rd District in the Republican Party again this fall. It's been a real honor representing this community. I'm a lifelong Kansan farm kid, and just really want to see us get things done in Washington, D.C. and work together. And I've built a lot of relationships across the aisle. Emmanuel Cleaver and I work on a lot of projects together. And I think what ultimately people want is leaders who are willing to say, let's just get things done. Let's put aside our political differences, and let's work on behalf of the people that we represent.
Congressman, this is your district, Johnson County, that we're waiting on this morning. So they just spent roughly $10 million, a little over $10 million on this new voting equipment, and so much has been made about voting security in this election and the general election to come and what people should worry about. What would you tell voters about what this means, about how they should feel about how secure their vote is whenever they go to the ballot?
Well, I think they work to make it more secure. You know, it's a new printout system. You get to actually look at your ballot and cast the ballot and know that it's accurate. I think what we need is both accurate and quick election results. And so that's something we're going to have to look at and make sure that we can get these results the evening that the elections happen.
Now, how do you bridge the divide in the GOP when you go back, if you go back this session?
Well, look, you know, I believe we're unified not only within the GOP, but in this country on core principles. We all want to see the economy grow, right? We all want better opportunity for our kids and grandkids. We want investments in education and our national defense and stronger borders and supporting our veterans. These are things that I've fought for in Washington, D.C. These are unifying issues. We know there are things that divide us that we may not resolve. I don't focus on those things. I try to focus on where are our points of agreement, and whether you're a Democrat or independent or even a Republican who doesn't agree with me, I'm willing to listen and collaborate and work together to solve problems. And I think that's an attitude and a style that has worked well for me and made me effective in Washington, D.C.
Speaking of people who don't agree with you, we're talking about Brent Welder and Sharice Davids we're waiting to find out who's going to be your opponent in this race. What do you know about these two people that could be your opponent? Well,
they're essentially carbon copies of each other. You know, there were 6 candidates in the race. Several of them were running as mainstream moderate candidates. Mike McCammon, Tom Neerman. They didn't fare as well. These were the two that were running as unabashed you know, progressives, liberals. Bernie Sanders was in for one of my opponents. You know, they both argue for abolishing ICE, forcing all of us onto a government-run healthcare system, raising our taxes. And I just think, you know, things are going so well economically right now. Why would we want to turn back the clock and go to these more radical, liberal, socialist ideas? That's not Kansas. That's not our values. And frankly, both of them, their first vote in Congress would be to elect Nancy Pelosi Speaker of the House. And I've talked to a lot of people on a lot of doors. They don't want that to happen. And so this is not only a referendum on my job and the work we're doing, but it's also a question of who do you want to be the Speaker? Who do you want to run the chamber? And I don't think people want to see her back in that position.
You know, we've seen people from both parties running on those outside edges of both of the parties, and a lot of focus on newcomers and outsiders and not the same old politics. And that would not be you. You have spent a lot of time at the Capitol. What do you say to that?
Well, I've worked hard to serve my community. You know, I love this state. As I mentioned, you know, I'm a farm kid. I believe in our values. I care about our community. We have some of the best schools in America right here in the 3rd District. I want to fight to preserve those. I want to make sure we have greater job opportunities. I mean, look at the economy. Look at our results. Unemployment lines are as low as they've been since 1969. We cut taxes on small businesses to the lowest level since 1931. These are really positive measures that are really helping a lot of families in my district. You know, I've also worked to reform the immigration system, to secure our borders, and to, you know, support the dreamers. You know, this isn't about, it's about border security, but it's also about understanding that immigrants are part of our community and part of our country. I've supported enhancement for childcare to help families be able to have the tools so they can go to work and provide for their families. And so I think part of the issue is when you have people such as my opponents that are out on the fringes trying to rile up the base, that doesn't appeal to the center of the electorate. And that's where I've, you know, spent my time focused on what are those issues that work for all of us. How do we have voices that work and represent all of us in our politics, and that's what I've tried to do.
Before we let you go, we have to ask you about this Collier and Kobach race that's continuing this morning. We're hoping for final numbers by 8 a.m. Which one of those do you think? Do you think one of those winning affects whether or not we might see President Trump or Vice President Pence come and visit Kansas before November? Do you think either of those changes that?
I mean, that's a good question. We know that President Trump's been a little closer to Chris Kobach and endorsed him, of course, on Monday, so that might affect that. But I mean, I think ultimately, whoever wins these primaries, you're going to see the parties kind of coalesce behind the nominees, and the governor's race will be close in the fall. You know, there's also an independent in there with Greg Orman, which might have an impact on that. But I suspect that they'll be able to hold that. But look, they're going to have to get out and campaign hard and show voters in my community who are very independent-minded that they're working to fight for schools and for their communities, because I think people are concerned. They want to make sure that their governor understands what's important to them and their family. That's what I've tried to do as a member of Congress, keeping their taxes down, creating jobs, supporting child care, supporting education, supporting medical research to cure diseases like Alzheimer's and cancer. I think they're going to need to speak to those broad issues. And that race kind of got out on the edge too, right? As they were fighting for Republican votes. We didn't have that challenge in our primary. We were able to focus on those kitchen table issues that affect independents and Democrats and Republicans alike. And so we'll stay there in that spot, working for everybody.
Can I just ask, how often when you go out does someone bring up immigration to you, or how often do people call your office? Because no matter what part of the party you're in, everyone's talking about it.
Everyone is concerned about immigration, from folks that, you know, I think most people, I will say this, I think there are some common themes. I think people are very divided on it, but at the same time I hear common themes. I think most people want to see our border secured. I think this idea that my opponents are pushing of abolishing ICE, abolishing immigration enforcement, that is a fringe issue. That is not where the mainstream of folks are. Most people want to see our immigration laws enforced, but I think people also want to see it done humanely. They don't want to see families separated. We have a compassion as Americans. We know that immigration is part of who we are as an American people. It's part of our heritage, and it's going to be part of our future. They just want to see it done legally, and they want to support that merit system that says, you know, we're going to let people in the country legally, but if you try to come in illegally, or, you know, these cartels made $64 billion off of trafficking drugs into America last year. It's stunning, and it comes to our communities, and these drugs get sold to our friends and neighbors. You know, overdoses now is the leading cause of death for people under 50 in America. So the crisis at the border.
How do you find the middle in immigration?
Well, listen, it's very difficult, I will tell you.
Right.
As someone who's trying to bring us together on that issue, I will tell you it is very challenging. But what I've argued is we need to enforce our immigration laws, but we need to do it humanely. Right? And I just think that's where most people are.
Congressman Yoder, thank you for your time this morning. Fresh off his win last night in the primary. We don't know who he'll be facing yet in November. We thank you for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me on.